Okay, our next section, and this will actually be our last section in Chapter 7, and then we'll move on to Chapter 8 next week. We're going to look at how to, actually we're reviewing solving a system of inequalities, and we're going to add a little bit to it since now we've done a little bit this semester with graphing circles and graphing parabolas. So we're going to add those to our inequalities. But let's first go ahead and just jump right into an example and review how to graph just a basic linear equality. Alright, so graph the inequality. So I have 2x minus 3y is greater than or equal to 6. Okay? So, if you want to graph a linear inequality or a linear equation of any type, the first thing you have to do is get y by itself. Alright, so let's go ahead and work to get y by itself. And so I'm going to first go ahead and move the 2x over. So I'm going to subtract the 2x. So I get negative 3y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 6. Now to get y by itself, I'm going to go ahead and divide. Now be super careful. When I divide by a negative, what happens to this inequality sign? That inequality sign flips directions. So I have 2/3 x minus 2. Alright? So remember, from this equation, you find out that your slope is 2/3 and the y-intercept is negative 2. I'm going to go ahead and do these today on graph paper. You certainly don't have to. If you want to put them in your notes, you can. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my little graph. And the reason I'm going to use graph paper is because these we're going to shade. So let me go ahead and grab a sharpened colored pencil, if I have one. And I'm going to go to negative 2, which is my y-intercept. And I have a slope of 2/3. So I go positive 2, rise of 2, run of 3. Now the next, you got a couple of questions to ask yourself. One question is going to be, is the line dotted or solid? And you'll know that based on your inequality. Because this is less than or equal to, anything on the line is part of a solution. So I'm going to draw a solid line. And I want it to be less than, okay? So do you understand that if I were to shade there, above the line it would be greater than, below the line would be less than. So your solution would look like this. Alright, so that's graphing a linear inequality. Let's go ahead and talk about how to do, well, let's do one more. I'm going to stay on my graph paper. And let's say I asked you to graph y is greater than negative 3. Alright, so again, let's draw our axis. So I have y is greater than negative 3. So you go to negative 3 on the y-axis. Now, the line y equals lays down. Because this is a greater than and not a greater than equal to, I'm going to do a dashed line, and I will shade greater than this line would be above. Okay? So that's a linear equation. Let's go ahead and we're going to graph, ooh, great day. Let's go ahead and we'll do one more, just to make sure that you guys totally have this before I add on to it. So how about if I do 3x plus 6y is less than or equal to 12. So again, I'm going to go ahead and solve it for y. So I get 3y is less than or equal to negative 3x plus 12. Now I divide everybody by 6. So I get y is less than or equal to negative 1/2 x plus 2. So my slope is negative 1/2 x. My y-intercept is 2. Okay. So I'm going to come to my graph. I have a slope of a negative 1/2 and a y-intercept of 2. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and my y-intercept is the first thing I'm going to graph at 2. I have a slope of negative 1/2, so this time I'm going to fall 1, rise, run 2. Fall 1, run 2. Now, you really only have to put 1 dot. Sometimes I put 2 just to get a more accurate line. This time I'm dealing with a less than or equal to. So I'm going to do a solid line, and I'm going to shade below again. If it were greater than, I would shade above. Okay? Alright, so those are linear equations. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and shift to nonlinear equations. So, still the same thing, let's go ahead and graph this guy. So if I do x squared plus y squared is less than or equal to 9. So, this is a circle. I know it's not an ellipse. First of all, because we're doing things out of order, ellipses and hyperbolas don't even exist in this chapter yet. But this would be a circle because they both have a 1 underneath them. So if you remember, the center is whatever's attached to the x and y. So here my center is 0, 0. My radius is this number. So I take the square root of 9 and get 3. Okay, so that's r squared, so r is 3. Alright, let me check my inequality symbol. It is a less than or equal to, so I know that I'm going to go ahead and draw a solid circle. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put this on my graph. So I'm at the center. My circle has a radius of 3. I do a solid circle, and I shade in here. Okay? Alright, I'm going to do one more with you, and then we're going to talk about how to shade systems. Okay, so let's do one last one. Let's go ahead and do a parabola. So I have y is less than x squared minus 9. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go straight to the graph with the parabolas. Now, I'm going to draw my graph way off kilter because that negative 9 means that I have shifted this parabola down 9 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's the beginning vertex of my parabola. Now, when you graphed parabolas way back in Chapter 2, do you remember that to get your next points, you could go up 1, over 1? So the next points were over 1, up 1. And from here, do you remember that your points were then over 2, up 4? Now, this was a less than, so let's do a dotted line. And I'm going to shade less than. So greater than would be above the parabola. I want to shade below the parabola. Okay? Alrighty. So now let's do the fun stuff of putting these things together and solve a system of linear inequalities. So example 2. Graph the solution set to each system. So, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and separate these, get them both as to y equals, and then we're going to graph each one. So I have x minus y is less than 1, and then I have 2x plus 3y is greater than or equal to 12. Alright, so this one, let's go ahead and get y by himself. So negative y is less than negative x plus 1. I just moved x over, which made him negative. Now I need to get rid of the negative 1 in front of y. Now be careful, you just divided by a negative, so my inequality becomes a greater than. Alright, let's go ahead and get this puppy on the graph. So I'm going to use two different colored pens when I graph this one. So the first thing I'm going to graph is I have a y-intercept of negative 1. And I have a slope of 1. So I go up 1 over 1. I'm just going to do it again just so I get a fun. Okay? Now, dotted line or solid line. This is a greater than. Let's do a dotted line. Shading above or below. Since it's greater than, I'm going to shade above. And I want you to shade lightly. Okay? Just enough for you to see it, but it not to be super noticeable. Okay, head back to your paper. Let's solve this guy for y. So I get 3y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 12. And I'm going to divide everybody by 3. So I get y is, since it was a positive 3, the inequality stays, greater than or equal to negative 2/3 x plus 4. Alright, head back to your graph. So this time I have a y-intercept of 4. I'm going to go down 2 over 3. Okay, again, dotted line or solid line. It's going to be a solid line. And I'm going to shade greater than, so I'm shading above. Again, let's do it lightly. Now, at this point, you ought to see that your pink and your blue, or whatever colors you're using, intersected up here. Okay? So I'm going to take now a different color and shade that, so I know this is my answer. All this stuff up here. One thing we need to do, though, is go back. Do you see that this is a dotted line? So right here, we're not going to count that point, so you put an open circle there. That shows me that, so that's going to happen anytime you have dotted lines. You're going to want to circle it. Alright? Let's try another system. So this one was linear. Let's try a non-linear. So how about if I ask you to graph y is greater than or equal to x squared minus 4, and x minus y is greater than or equal to 2. Okay, this first guy is going to be your nice little parabola. Y is greater than x squared minus 4. And now I'm going to have this one I need to go ahead and solve. X minus y is greater than or equal to 2. So I get negative y is greater than or equal to negative x plus 2. Now when I divide by my negative 1 again, be careful because now that becomes a less than or equal to x minus 2. Alright, we ready to graph? Let's graph this parabola first. Alright, so this parabola has been shifted down 4. So I go down 2, 3, 4. Now remember, go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. If you guys want to then do the up 2 over 4, you know, that's fine. I'm just going to kind of sketch it in now. So I want greater than or equal to, so it's going to be a solid line. and I want greater than, so I am going to shade this time in the parabola. And again, let's shade lightly. I sure didn't start out that way. Alright, let's look at our second thing we need to graph. So I need to graph, let's see, a y-intercept of -2 and a slope of 1. And it's a less than or equal to, so it's going to be a solid line as well. And I'm going to shade less than, so I'm shading everything down here. So now I look at where did they overlap. So they overlap here. Good news is they're both solid lines, so I'm not going to have to deal with any open circles at all. And I'm going to get something that looks like that. Okay? Alright. Let's do one more, and then we will call it a day. Right? So I'm going to graph y. Let me start over. 2x plus 3y is greater than or equal to 6, and 2x plus 3y is less than or equal to 0. Alright, let's go ahead and separate them. So I have 2x plus 3y is greater than or equal to 6. So I get 3y is greater than or equal to -2x plus 6. So y is greater than or equal to -2/3 x plus 2. Okay, let's graph it. So I'm at +2, and I have a slope of -2/3. So I go down 2 over 3. It is a greater than or equal to, oh good Lord, pencils are flying everywhere. So a solid line, and I want to shade greater than, so I shade above. Alright, let's look at the second puppy. I have too many writing utensils right now. I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So let's do 2x plus 3y is less than or equal to 0. So 3y is less than or equal to -2x. So y is less than or equal to -2/3 x. Alright, let's go back to that same graph. This time, however, I start at the origin, and I go down 2 over 3. So do we notice they're parallel lines? Solid line, shaded less than, so I shade down here. So where do they overlap? They don't. So then this has no solution. Now, could I have figured that out before I graphed it? Actually, you probably should have been able to figure it out when you get to here. Because you know that they're parallel lines. You know this one is shaded above, this one is shaded below, so they would have no overlap. But there's nothing wrong if you have to shade it for you to be able to figure that out. Alright? Last thing I'm going to have you do is go ahead and write down the problem that we'll start with in class tomorrow. So the last one we're going to do is solve a bigger system of equations. I'm going to solve x minus y is less than 2. -2 is less than or equal to... Actually, you know what? Let's just wait. That's not the problem I wanted. So we'll finish this up tomorrow. You guys have a great evening, and I will see you then.